for September the 4th, and we're looking at our Old Testament reading from Ecclesiastes 7 verse 1 through chapter 9 verse 18. In particular, we're going to start out looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 15 and then go on to 16 and look at them as a whole. Ecclesiastes 7:15 says, "In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in evil doing." Well, we're familiar with the English phrase, "I've seen everything." Here, it's perfect for the Hebrew text where it begins by saying, "The all I have seen." So the all is emphasized. The interesting thing is that in chapter 1 verse 2, Solomon said that the all is vanity. Yet by chapter 12 verse 13, Solomon concludes that in the life of the human individual, all or everything is to fear God and to keep his commandments. You might have also noticed that in the ESV version, the English Standard Version of the Bible, the phrase, "in my vain life," has a footnote that indicates vain can mean vapor or breath. So putting it all together, the literal translation reads, "The all I have seen in the days of my vanity," or vapor. What Solomon has observed is something similar to what was pointed out in the book of Job. Sometimes those who are righteous suffer for it, and sometimes those who are unrighteous seem to actually be profiting from evil. Then we can look at verses 16 and 17. In verse 16 it says, "Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself?" This is certainly an unexpected turn of phrase, to say the least. I think it's safe to say, however, in the light of verse 20, that there is no one who is righteous in the absolute sense of always doing what is good and never sinning. But beyond that, I think it's also safe to say that a person ought not take himself or herself too seriously. I don't mean that this is license to sin or some kind of libertinism where people go on sinning without a care in the world. Yet, perfectionism is certainly something that destroys a person physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Placing burdens upon yourself that you were never meant to bear is a recipe for disaster. Certainly it causes a lot of stress, and stress is not good for a person when there is too much of it. In verse 17 it says literally, "You should not be wicked excessively, and you should not be a fool." Why should you die when it's not your time? Ultimately, it is lack of faith that makes a person unprepared to die and face God's judgment, while a believer is righteous by grace and so is prepared whenever the end may come. You put these two verses, verse 16 and 17 in Ecclesiastes 7 together, and they describe the golden mean. You want to avoid the extremes of being overly righteous and wise, or being excessively wicked and foolish. Being overly righteous is a strange sounding topic in a book where wickedness is routinely decried. The truth, however, is that righteousness will seldom be rewarded during the believer's earthly life in this perverted world of ours. The reader is warned not to set himself or herself up for the kill in that respect, thinking that, oh, if only I can be righteous enough, the world will beat a path to my door and the honors will start rolling in. It's just not going to happen. The believer's glorious treasure is now hidden with Christ in heaven to be revealed only on the last day. Also, this is saying that the believers should not go out of their way to be so conspicuously righteous that they end up provoking the world with their in-your-face posture of righteousness. Now, we're not to hide our light under a bushel basket, but neither do we need to take extra measures to incite persecution. Flaunting your righteousness just for the sake of flaunting it causes needless problems. Finally, a person can develop the attitude that he or she is more righteous than other believers. Comparing is never good in this way. There is always the danger in the sanctified life that a believer will start to focus more and more on himself or herself and his or her perception of their own sanctification, but less and less on the work of Jesus Christ, who alone is our wisdom and our righteousness and our sanctification. Ezekiel 16:15 expresses this quite well when it says that in the case of Israel, God's people became a princess who trusted her own beauty rather than the one who made her beautiful. The true fruit of faith in the believer's life. It often doesn't even enter our consciousness. The left hand of the child of God is genuinely unaware of what the right hand is doing. And on the last day, God's child will scratch their head in puzzlement when the Lord calls attention to their good works. In short, there is danger not only in expecting one's righteousness to be rewarded, but also in expecting it to be noticed at all. Being overly righteous beclouds grace, which is the only thing, namely grace, that can enable anyone to stand before the throne of God. May God be with you and bless you, and I'll look forward to talking with you again very soon. And I'll look forward